Good morning, it's August the 5th, 2015. Welcome to Real Estate Tips. I'm Wayne Russell, instructor, broker associate with Remax Southwest, Sugar Land, Texas. Most of the information that we discuss comes from realtors, newspaper articles, magazines, emails, and from different sources. The material provided here is for information purposes only, is not intended and should not be considered as legal advice for your particular matter. Before I get started on my outline, I'd just like to talk about a few things, some current events that's happening in this area right here. When you go out and get listings or working with buyers, they're going to ask you about what's going on in the Sugar Land, Missouri City, Stafford area. So I just wanted to kind of keep you abreast of what's going on. This is comes from the Fort Bend Community Extra. United Way buys building in Stafford, based in the community for 20 years. The agency will expand services with a larger facility. The Fort Bend County office of United Way in Greater Houston is moving to another facility soon. In June, United Way officials announced the purchase of a 79,000 square foot building in Stafford. Anyway, that's some information on United Way. The next one is, I don't know if you all are familiar with this, but maybe you are. In the Fort Bend Independent, they talked about the shopping, dining, museum, hotel planned at Imperial Sugar Mill site. The historic structures of the former Imperial Sugar Refinery will soon be restored and brought back to life as signature features of Imperial Market. An upscale shopping, dining, entertainment, and culture destination with incorporates a high-end boutique hotel, Class A office space, the Fort Bend Children's Discovery Center, Sugar Land Heritage Foundation Museum, along with luxury multifamily residences. This was in the Fort Bend Independent. And Deal brings 6,000 seats. This is also in the Fort Bend Community Extra. Deal to bring 6,000 seats for new center. Sugar Land also purchased a theatrical equipment for a performance venue. This is going to be the Smart Financial Center. This is also in the, by the way, this Sugar Land Council has approved a $3.77 million in new contracts for theatrical equipment and lighting and thousands of seats. The city's planned $84 million performance center. A $1.2 million contract was approved by Irwin Seating Company for design, layout, and installation of 6,000 padded and upholstery chairs for the audiences of a facility called the Smart Financial Center. This is in behind the
Texas Instruments.
Yes, Texas Instruments at near the intersection of University Boulevard and 59. It also mentions the Smart Center at Sugar Land names first founding partner. ACESL LLC was announced Mercedes-Benz of Sugar Land as the founding partner of the latest project, the Smart Financial Center at Sugar Land. And of course, the Smart Financial has the naming rights. It's Smart Financial Credit Union. It's going to have the naming rights for that for 5 years, and they have another option for 5 more years. And that was in the Fort Bend Lifestyles and Homes. And if you think there's a lot of traffic on Highway 6, well, it's probably because there's some more traffic. They're going to expand. The Sugar Land City Council recently approved a $500,000 design contract with Brown and Gay Engineering for expansion of State Highway 6 from Brook Street to Lexington. So if you're going to be in that area anytime soon, well, you're going to have some, a lot of traffic.
Brook Street to Lexington.
Right.
Right through 59.
Going to add an extra lane?
Apparently so, probably on both sides, but anyway, it's going to be expanded, so I hope that it'll work out. I don't know how long it's going to take. It didn't quite say. Let's see.
Should be a mess for a while.
Right. So
especially
anyway,
just before Brook Street's crazy.
It says the project will help support Sugar Land's expanding sales tax base and improve mobility for residents. And also in the Fort Bend Community Extra, plans more land to boost University of Houston Sugar Land. Plans more land to boost University of Houston Sugar Land. Texas legislature provides funding for relocation of Fort Bend County campus. Part of the University of Houston College of Technology will relocate to Sugar Land with a planned $54 million building is completed in 2019. Additional programs in business and education and health-related fields are also expected in the next 2 to 5 years. University of Houston's land campus, which is at the US 59 University Boulevard intersection. So a lot of activity in that University Boulevard and 59 with the Sharp Center,
Explain that again, because I missed it with all that noise.
This one right here is the University of Houston going to expand.
Okay, the school?
Yes. And they also bought additional property Additional programs is in business, education, and health-related fields are also expected in the next 2 to 5 years at University of Houston Sugar Land campus, which is at US 59 University Boulevard intersection. In addition, University of Houston Sugar Land is gaining 16 more acres from the Texas Department of Transportation that will factor in the development of the campus master plan. And let's see here. Oh, of course, in the Fort Bend Independent, Riverstone maintains Texas ranking for 3rd year. In other words, Riverstone has again been ranked #1 top-selling master plan community in Texas for 3rd consecutive year.
Wow.
And
you'd think I could find something for that.
Anyway, the last but not least, the mortgage giant Freddie Mac said that the average rate on the 30-year fixed rate mortgage declined to 3.98% this week from 4.04% a week earlier. The rate on the 15-year fixed rate mortgages eased from 3.17% from 3.21. So, okay, so anyway, my outlines is, does the buyer have to pay for a new survey when seller can't find his? Who chooses a repairman when the transactions doesn't close on time? What do you know about around-the-house measurements? Seller's invitation to buyer to submit new offer, addendum for sale of other property. Seller must agree on closing date. Which lead-based paint form do you use? Or are you an agent or sub-agent? And last but not least, code of ethics. I try to cover the code of ethics just a little bit at the tail end of each one of these sessions. Okay, does the buyer have to pay for a new survey when seller can't find his? My buyer client checked 6-1 in the 1 to 4 family residential contract agreeing to pay for a new survey if the existing survey isn't approved by the title company or buyer's lender. The seller's agent told me the seller can't find his existing survey, so my client will have to pay for a new one. Does my client have to pay for a new survey in this instance? No. In other words, if you check, if the contract and this first box here in the 1 to 4 family, if it says 6C, it says within so many days the seller will provide for a survey, and also too the T47. So if you're going out and listing a house, make sure that you have the survey and the T47. The T47 has to be signed before a notary, and make sure you have that information, not at closing, but ASAP. So
I'm trying to see if I can get you some advertising rights here.
Okay, thank you, Todd. Anyway, let's see. So anyway, if the seller doesn't provide the T47 in the survey, then they'll end up paying for a survey if they check that box 6-1. Okay. The direct contracts require the seller to complete the agreed repairs. Oh, hold on for a second. Thank God. Went to the wrong page here just for a second here. Page 6-1, if they check that, no, the seller who cannot find the existing survey isn't exempt from furnishing it. If the seller agreed to deliver the existing survey to the buyer, he is required to deliver the survey and the affidavit within the specified time. If 6C says it in bold, the seller fails to furnish the existing survey or affidavit within the time prescribed, buyer shall obtain a new survey at seller's expense. You can read the rest on your own.
So who pays?
Negotiable. Well, no, the seller will pay for this new survey ordered by the buyer, and the buyer will obtain the survey paid for by the seller if they check 6C1.
Yeah, but it has down here, at seller's or buyer's expense. Down at the last sentence?
Yeah, but read the darker.
The heavy bold, here, it says, that's the key thing right here, it supersedes what else is saying. It says, if seller fails to furnish the existing survey or affidavit within the times prescribed, buyer shall obtain a new survey at seller's expense.
Only if they don't provide it within that time period.
Well, yes. Well, they need to provide this T47 and the survey. So if you go get a listing and they said, I have a survey, make sure that you give them the T47 to sign right away. Don't wait till closing, because the buyer may obtain a new survey, the seller will have to pay for that survey. So what's your closing cost on your HUD closing statements are the new closing statements. It comes out after October, but just watch who's paying for what, because sometimes the title company could make a mistake.
That at this time, we don't know.
So, okay. The next is, does the buyer to pay for a new, okay, who chooses the repairman? My seller client has executed a contract with the buyer after the buyer completed his inspection report during the option period. You know, usually it's 10 days, 12 days, 15, 7 days. After he completed his inspection during the option period, the buyer has asked my client to make several repairs to use a repairman the buyer chose. My client agreed to complete the repairs, but does he have to agree to use the buyer's repairman? No. A contract requires the seller to complete the agreed repairs before closing, but the contracts don't provide for a buyer to designate who makes the repairs. Note that the completion of repairs and treatments paragraph contracts have required the seller to either use someone who is licensed to make the repairs, or if no license is required by law, the seller must use someone who is commercially engaged in the trade of providing such repairs, unless the buyer or seller agree otherwise in writing. So when you're in 7C1 in the 1 to 4 family contract, it states in there lender required repairs. By the way, who's responsible for lender required repairs?
No.
Neither. Unless otherwise agreed in writing, neither party is obligated to pay for lender required repairs. Completion of repairs and treatments, unless otherwise agreed to in writing, seller shall complete all agreed repairs and treatments prior to closing date. All required permits must be obtained, and repairs and treatments must be performed by persons who are licensed to provide such repairs or treatments. If no license is required by law, are commercially engaged in trading and providing such repairs and treatments. At buyer's election, any transferable warranties received by seller will respect to repairs, treatments will be transferred to the buyer at buyer's expense. If seller fails to complete any of the agreed repairs and treatments prior to closing date, buyer may exercise remedies under paragraph 15. And then if seller fails to complete to extend the, anyway, they can extend the closing, or anyway, go to paragraph 15. Now, paragraph 15, right here, it says that if seller fails to comply with this contract, seller will be in default, and buyer may enforce specific performance, seek such other relief as may be provided by law or both, terminate the contract, receive the earnest money, and thereby releasing both parties from the contract. Okay, let's skip to the next one. When does when the transaction doesn't close on time? The closing paragraph 9A of the direct sales contract states if either party does not close by the date specified in paragraph 9A, the party not responsible for contract failing to close can look to default paragraph 15 for available remedies. However, that doesn't mean the contract automatically terminates. The buyer and seller both want to continue with the transaction. The parties can agree to extend the closing date rather than initiate any action related to default. Paragraph 3 of the TREC amendment, TAR 1903, TREC 39-7, provides the opportunity to designate a new closing. Your closing is right in here on paragraph 9, but of course, you put a certain date in there, and it seemed like to me, I don't know, it just seemed like to me over 50% of the time, they don't close on that date. And so you'll be getting...
It's more like 100% of the time.
Right. So you'll be preparing and keep amendments to contracts in your on your desk at all times, or your, you know, somewhere it's available, because you'll be extending the maybe 2 or 3 times. Todd, have you ever had an extension?
4. I got one that I did 4 times.
4 times. Okay. So keep your amendment handy to extend the closing and make sure everyone signs it, because if you don't, then you'll have a problem. So anyway, just wanted to go over that with you real quick like. The next is, by the way, y'all are, I don't know if y'all deal in acreage, but how many square foot in an acre?
43,560.
Oh, you're looking at the answer.
No, I'm not.
Oh, okay. How many square foot in an acre? 43,560. The standard height for a garage door is 7 feet. What is the most common height for a kitchen counter? Is 36 inches. The U.S. Department of Energy says an 80-gallon water heater is usually sufficient for a home with 3 to 4 people. True. Which of these air-conditioned sizes would the American Society of Home Inspectors deem appropriate for a 2,000 square foot home in the southern United States? 3 to 4 tons. Just some general information there. This one right here, the next one is, if a seller receives an offer from some aspect that makes it unfavorable, she has an option besides accepting it, rejecting it, or sending the buyer a counter offer. The seller's invitation to buyer to submit a new offer. In other words, let's just say you're making this is like a counter offer. But if you use this seller's invitation to buyer to submit an offer, which is this form right here, at the very bottom it says this communication invitation is not a counter offer. The property remains on the market. Seller may consider other offers and accept another offer. So anyway, as I said, you can use TAR 1926, allows the seller to explain what would make the buyer's offer more acceptable while keeping the property available to other offers. So it doesn't, you know, if you use this right here, you can still negotiate with other buyers. Okay.
Ours is blank. I got a blank page.
You did?
Yeah,
Okay.
I went in backwards.
Oh. Anyway, I'm going to start on this one right here. My client wants to purchase here. This is the page I'm on right here.
We don't have it.
We don't
It's
have
blank.
it. It's blank.
It's blank? Okay, well anyway, do y'all have this one right here, addendum for sale of other property?
Yes.
Okay, let me just go over this real quick, like, because I want to relate to the addendum for sale of other property by buyer, and I'll just read it to you. Sorry that didn't take it, but my client wants to purchase a property and make the contract contingent on the sale of his current home. Do I have to use the addendum for sale of other property by buyer, or can I just write the language in the special provisions of the 1 to 4 family residential contract? You must provide the addendum. Trek rule requires a license holder to provide the addendum for sale of other property. So you have to use this one right here. You just can't throw it in, can't put it in special provisions. The next one here, does a buyer always have to use the addendum for sale of other property by buyer if she's selling another property? In other words, maybe she can qualify on 2 loans, so she doesn't have to use this. A buyer who can qualify for a loan without having to sell her other property doesn't need to use the addendum. The next one, can a broker modify the addendum for sale of other property by buyer when the buyer wants to make a contract contingent on some other events such as transfer, receiving probate proceeds? And the answer is no. And my client needs to close on the sale of his current home to afford purchasing a new home. Must he disclose to the seller? Yes. If your client's ability to perform under a contract, close the transaction is contingent on closing another property, the contingency should be made part of the contract by using the addendum for sale of other property, which is this addendum here. And if the buyer waives a contingency under the addendum for sale of other property by buyer, then doesn't qualify for a loan, does she get the earnest money back? No. Okay, that takes care of addendum for sale of other property by buyer. Okay. We're going to jump to this one right here. Buyer and seller must agree on closing date. I listed my home for sale last month and quickly received a full price offer. Wow, full price offer. From a woman who wants to close the deal in 30 days. I agreed to her offering price, but sent her a letter stating I would need at least 60 days to close the deal. By the way, on this financing after October the 3rd, I'd put in there at least 60 days to close. I don't think they're going to be in a position to close in 30 to 45 days anymore. I think your closing is going to be longer. So it's just the way it is after October the 3rd. Anyway, she said she can't wait 60 days. The seller can't wait for 60 days and now wants her deposit back. Can I keep the deposit because I accepted her full price offer? Sorry. You'll have to give your potential buyer her deposit back if you cannot reach a compromise on a suitable closing date. In other words, you change the closing date so you void the contract. If you cannot reach a compromise on a suitable closing, although you agreed to accept the full price offer, your written request for a 60-day closing instead of a 30-day closing constituted a legal counteroffer for the buyer could either accept or reject. By making a counteroffer, you rendered the buyer's original offer null and void. Okay, and then there's 2 different types of lead-based paint addendums in the back. You probably know the difference, but real quick, like if it says sellers, just that's that's when they're buying or selling. And then at the top where it says lease, you know, that's how you differentiate between the two.
Oh, I didn't realize there was a difference.
Which lead paint form do you use? I'm confused. There are two different lead-based paint forms available to Texas Realtors. Which form is appropriate for use? It depends on whether you have a sales transaction or a lease transaction. The form titled Addendum for Seller's Disclosure of Information on Lead-Based Paint. Lead-based paint hazards 1906, TAR 1906. Is a TREC that complies with federal law. Use this form anytime TREC or TAR contract form is used at the sale of the property with the dwelling built before 1978. So if you're going out and getting listings on property, say in an older neighborhood and the homes like, say, the Heights or whatever, and built before 1978, take your, if you're listing it, make sure that you fill this one out right here where it says sellers, if you're listing a property for sale.
So I guess the safe thing, if you're listing a property for sale or lease, do both
Well, take them
forms.
both. Take them both. It says then the form entitled Addendum regarding lead-based paint TAR 2008 is a TAR form that complies with federal law. Texas Realtors should use this form when the TAR residential lease form is used for residential property built before 78. This form is for lease transactions only. So, as you say, you might be trying to sell it and or lease it, so might as well just get them both, because you don't know what's going to happen. You might lease it before you sell it, or you might lease it and then the tenant may end up buying it. So have them available. Are you an agent or sub-agent? A buyer asked me to show him property that listed for sale in MLS, but he didn't sign a representation agreement. If I show him the property without a signed representation agreement, would I be considered a sub-agent of the seller? Now don't forget, sometimes in MLS, you'll notice that you have a buyer's agent for, say, X%, and you have a sub-agent. Sometimes they'll say 0.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you're a sub-agent of the listing agent, you know what your fee is? 0. So you have to sometimes explain that to the buyer that you're working with. If you don't get a buyer's representation agreement signed by you, you may be a sub-agent, but I'm going to go a little bit further in this article. It says, would I be considered a sub-agent of the seller? It depends. If you've created an agency relationship in which you're representing the buyer, even if you haven't signed a representation agreement, then you have a fiduciary duty to the buyer and you're not a sub-agent of the seller. A sub-agency relationship is not as common as it used to be. See, back in the 60s and 70s, maybe the 80s, everybody was, you know, the seller was paying the commission, so both agents represented the owner. Isn't that right, Betty?
That's right.
So anyway, it was common practice that you were like a sub-agent.
Both agents represented the seller?
Mm-hmm. Well, they didn't represent. They
worked for the seller.
They worked for the seller.
Yeah.
The seller paid the commission, and so they were kind of, he was like a sub-agent. So they didn't have buyer representation agreements. As one of the agents in the office in 1868, no, in the 1968, they didn't have buyer's reps. You know, they didn't have a lot. They had one-page contracts, legal size. Now it's 8 pages long. And the lease is 14 some odd pages long. And of course, they're going to make some more changes in the contracts too. So I'll have that information for you at a later date. The sub-agent relationship is not as common as it used to be, but it usually arises when a buyer who's not represented uses the services of a broker to view the property. That broker then owes a fiduciary duty to the listing broker and the seller, not the buyer. And the buyer is treated as a customer. So he's not a client until you get the buyer's rep signed. He's just a customer. So, you know, I would try to get a buyer's representation agreement signed if you can. Now, the listing agent, I've never had a listing agent ask me for the buyer's rep. They just asked for the information about broker services signed, and they didn't ask for, you know, anything else. So, of course.
Okay, so to break this down to make it a little clearer, because I'm still not clear about on the MLS listing where I've seen where they'll put the buyer gets 3%, the sub-agent gets 2%.
Well, right.
So they're saying
sometimes I've seen it 0.
You know, a lot of times I see 0, and I just assume that's because they don't, when they're filling it out, they're not sure what to put there.
Well, if you're a sub-agent, and let's just say you just showed it one time, and he says, I want to write it up, but I want to sign a buyer's rep. You may have to get in the buyer's rep that the buyer pays the commission, because you're not going to get it from the seller.
So essentially, you're a sub-agent if you don't get a buyer's rep.
Correct.
Except for if you've already been acting
Right.
Right.
as.
Right. Now, if you've been working with him for a while, but let's just say you just went out with him one time and wanted to buy a house. Just one day. He says, write it up. I don't want to sign a buyer's rep, and it says 0 down there for sub-agent.
Yeah, it is 0. The listing agent can offer anything they want to offer. And so it's up to the listing agent to offer 0 if they want to, or offer 1%, or offer 3%.
Now, if you don't have a buyer's rep and you take them a contract, you may get 0, according to MLS. The MLS is really strong. They'll supersede contracts. I mean, if you offer bonuses in MLS and you don't pay it, you'll pay it sooner or later, even if it's not in a contract. Anyway, buyer is treated as a customer of the broker. It is important that the broker in this situation obtain permission from the listing broker and explain his or her role to the buyer to avoid any confusion. So, if you can, get that buyer's rep signed information about brokerage services signed by the person that you're working with.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so last but not least, I always try to cover a little bit of the code of ethics, and I have a thick book on code of ethics, so I'm only going to cover about 3 pages of every time. So just bear with me. Over the next X number of sessions, we'll cover the code of ethics complete from A to Z. The structure of the code. To understand the code structure, first look at the 3 major categories of the code. You'll find the first category listed immediately after the preamble. The first category is duties to the clients and customers. It's first because they are the most important duties we owe. Further in the code, you'll find the second category, duties to the public. And a bit further in the code, you'll find the third major category of the duties to realtors. If you're looking for ethical principle, think about it, how it relates to one of these categories, and look for it there. This will help you get acquainted with the code. I guess that's about it. Don't have any questions?
We get a copy of that page.
Sure.
Now.
Yeah, you can turn
Stop that.
Stop recording. Thank you, Todd.
And this presentation was brought to you by Gatorade.